We're back in England's utopia, Port Sunlight Village on the Wirral. It's a lovely, tranquil place. It was created by Lord Lever in the 1890s. He built these amazing cottages for his workers in this setting. We just looked at the War Memorial, going back to the First and Second World War. And Lord Leverhulme was a great patriot who loved this country. And he wanted to create an ideal community for the British to live in. And that's what it's turned out to be. I mean, it's lasted for almost 130 years and it's still prospering now. It's got the factory, the Unilever soap factory. People live in these villages, and it's a lovely sense of community here, an organic British community. There's a lovely sense of peace. As you walk through it, you see the different generations. The grandparents remain here. They're taking their grandchildren, their dogs for walks. The adults are working in the factory or the shops. We just had some lunch here. Some people are so friendly. It's an ideal setting. You think this is the ideal view of England. This is what we'd all aspire to if we had the opportunity. We'd live in a community like this. And yet, our politicians have not moulded Britain in this form. They've gone for a totally different model. In fact, the exact reverse of this. Where this is an organic community where people have a strong sense of identity and a strong sense of belonging, our politicians have gone for something called multiculturalism. They've decided to fracture our nation, bring groups in from outside, and supposedly to enrich us. That diversity is strength, and it's all to bless us. But it hasn't turned out that way, as far as I can perceive. I mean, if this is the ideal English community, the ideal multi-ethnic, multicultural community is London. And people have seen London totally transformed since the Second World War. Since the Windrush generation, and then the Islamic the community came in from Pakistan and Bangladesh, went to live in the East End, inhabited parts of Middlesex, and then London become more and more fractured. And London is almost like a balkanised city now. There is community after community which have developed their own little network within it. If you go to Stockwell, you get the Portuguese. If you go to the East End, you get the Bangladeshis. If you go to Brixton, you get the West Indians. Now you've got a Nigerian community, you've got Albanian community, you've got Turkish community. It's like a kaleidoscope of different communities. And yet it's completely lost its soul and its sense of unity. It's fractured. And there's a tension there now. We've just seen with the rise of this Black Lives Matter, BLM, and Sadiq Khan as mayor, he's pushing this multicultural agenda. And it's now all about excluding the English. We've become the unwanted people in London now. And we've become, in a sense, the persecuted people. Our culture is not taken seriously, it's not promoted. In fact, they want to destroy our culture now in London. They're talking about taking down statues. And that's just the first step. They want to take down, they're talking about churches being removed. Anything which points towards Englishness, the National Gallery has got to change. Everything's got to reflect multiculturalism. But how do you reflect multiculturalism? What do you do? I mean, there's no unifying point to it. It's just a mass of conflict. In fact, the only people they seem to be united against is the English. Multiculturalism is the rest against us. And that's how London is being governed now. That's how it's being policed. And they had this patriotic rally there to defend the cenotaph and Winston Churchill's statue, which had been vandalised by, an immigrant mob. But that was heavily policed, that patriotic rally. The police were kitted out for the occasion. They were very aggressive, very assertive, as if the patriots were not welcome in London. And as the patriots dispersed that day, a number of them were attacked, picked off by this Black Lives Matter groups. So it wasn't a pleasant experience. We made it pleasant because the English are like that. They can create pleasure out of nothing. But when the alternative mobs, when Black Lives Matter have their rallies or their meetings, the police approach to them is totally different. And we're seeing with all these raves that are taking place in London, parties over, that the police are willing to run away from an aggressive mob rather than face them down. It's like the mob has now got the authority in the city. It's like, because the police are still perceived as being British, they can no longer assert themselves in London. And this is the truth, isn't it? The truth is that London has fallen. It's no longer our city. I mean, even the presence of the Queen isn't there now. She said she's not going to return to Buckingham Palace after this coronavirus scare. It's almost like Boris Johnson is under siege in London because he's not their Prime Minister, you know. He's not the Prime Minister of the ethnic minorities. He's the Prime Minister of the British people. It's like we're living in a nation which is totally... There's a chasm. The cities are being turned into multicultural hellholes, and the English are being pushed out into the periphery, into the smaller towns and the villages. And this is very, very dangerous, because this momentum now is for the English to be excluded altogether. And because this is what happens. The population which inhabits a place determines its culture, determines its politics, determines every aspect of that society. So if we're bringing foreigners in, Britain is going to become a foreign land controlled by foreigners, and the English are going to be here at their whim. And it's a scary scenario that's unfolding, because what it is, crucially, is a break with our past. It means we're being shut off from our history, our roots are being cut away, and we'll have nothing to pass on to the future generation. The future generations will be alienated from their own land. And as we're here today in Port Sunlight, and we can see just the splendour of old England being continued and continually restored and improved. You know, this is what we really wanted. This is what we were voting for when we voted the Conservatives back into power with an 80-seat majority. We were voting for the continuation of British society, and yeah, they're acting like globalists. Now, I know the Conservatives only had a minority government when they took power in 2010. They inherited the whole baggage of Blairism and the whole constitutional and demographic changes of Blairism. I know that even in 2015, when Cameron got his majority, the focus was on Europe, and that fractured the Conservative Party, and that led to another coalition government with the DUP. So it's only really since this last election at the end of 2019 that the Conservatives have had a working majority in Parliament. But we want them to start changing their ideas. We want them to start representing Britain again. Now, we know Britain's moved on, and we know there has to be a reflection of that. But we need to break this Blair paradigm of multiculturalism, multi-ethnicity, the English being irrelevant. We've got to put the English and the British back at the centre of Britain. We've got to reunify our kingdom. We've got to reinvigorate our people, and we've got to claim, we've got to assert ownership of our land again. All these foreign groups, all these immigrant groups which have come in, are guests really in our country. Yes, we'll give them equality, we'll treat them with respect, but they've got to respect our inheritance. We have got to assert that this is our land again, because if we don't, we have no future. And this is what if the Conservative Party won't do it, we need a political force that will. And this is the challenge for Boris Johnson, to assert Britishness in Britain again, against all comers. First, we've got to get out of the EU, yeah, and he's going to do that. I believe, I've got faith in him to get us out of the EU, but then the real process begins of restoring Britain to the greatness that it deserves. Thank you.